For women to really be able to understand how mindfulness works, I think is beneficial to their baby and to their birth and to parenting.
Right.
Saying it louder than the contraction.
Right.
And it kind of like overpowered the contraction,
Right.
the visualization and the words.
Physical activity really helps not only bond with your baby. We talk a lot about how beneficial that is both in labor and birth, and then afterwards, of course. It helps with depression and anxiety.
Mindfulness for perinatal period, during pregnancy and after pregnancy is vital. It directly impacts the intrauterine environment that is so important for the child's future health as they go forward.
Welcome to the Mindful Birth, Peaceful Earth podcast, where we explore topics that can serve to water the seeds of peace for the next generation.
I'm Jayme Crockett.
And I'm Holly Lammer.
We are so grateful to Idaho Stork for the support as we launch our podcast. Stay tuned for some information about seafood safety and pregnancy from Christy Rhodes, a certified nurse midwife at Idaho Stork.
Welcome to the Mindful Birth, Peaceful Earth podcast, episode 1. I'm Holly Lammer, and I am a nurse and a yoga teacher and a childbirth instructor in Boise, Idaho. And in this episode, we're just going to talk about how we started this project, myself and my partner, Jayme. Jayme, you want to just introduce yourself really briefly, and then we can go into more detail about how we met.
Yes, I'm Jayme Crockett, and I am a birth photographer here in Boise, Idaho. I met Holly when I was pregnant with my last baby, who is now 2 years old. He was my 8th baby, and I went and took her prenatal yoga / intuitive birthing class with my husband, Ben. I signed up for prenatal yoga and intuitive birthing class. I was interested in Holly's class because she was not only teaching prenatal yoga, but she was also giving a lot of history and information about the physiology of birth, which I was really excited for my husband to be exposed to. Even though it was my 8th baby, it was my husband's first biological child. And so we were really excited to take this class together. And he was the only guy.
Yeah, I remember you guys came in. So when Jayme and I met, I was actually teaching kind of a mixed version of my prenatal yoga series, which is called Embryoga, and my childbirth series, which is called Intuitive Birth. And I had kind of combined those two and had invited the partners to come to 2 of the classes where I would be doing more hands-on labor support. And Jayme and Ben showed up, and I was like, oh, and Jayme was like, yeah, Ben wants to come to all the classes. I'm like, that's fine with me. So I thought it was really kind of cool because I had done previously this kind of class with partners, but it didn't really work out. So I was kind of excited to just see that Jayme and Ben were just going to go out there and do this thing.
Yeah, and we recorded. So Ben and I are videographers and photographers. And so we were excited about our pregnancy with our son. And so we recorded most of my prenatal visits and a lot of the things that we did together that had to do with our pregnancy. And so we brought our video camera and recorded a lot during Holly's class too. So Ben did a lot of recording during our class. And so that sort of led me to throughout my pregnancy. And then once Atticus was born and I was in my postpartum period, I was kind of reflecting back on the birth, and it was my 8th birth, and I had all babies unmedicated, and I was just sort of reflecting back on the process and thinking about what I'd learned in Holly's class, and how even though I knew a lot of things about natural birth and unmedicated childbirth and the physiology of birth, I still learned a lot of things from Holly that I really felt was important that women should hear and that families should hear when they're getting ready to birth a baby and to grow a baby and to raise a baby. And it was really interesting to me how she talked about the unborn baby's consciousness and how the baby was really affected while they're floating around inside your belly and they're growing. And so I decided that I really needed to talk to Holly about all of the stuff that we learned in hindsight of having this new baby, about really getting this information out to the public and figuring out how we could do some recording. And so that's kind of how we met.
Yeah. So just a little bit more history about myself. I had been a labor and delivery nurse for almost 20 years at a local hospital. Of course, early into that, I realized that what was going on in the environment that I was working in was really strange. And we talk a lot in future podcasts about the different, experiences of hospital birth and home birth and birth center. But basically, my history was trying to normalize hospital birth. I spent a lot of time and energy, and we're on committees and writing policies and on trying to support physiologic birth in the hospital. So it's not just about supporting unmedicated birth, but supporting the hormones of birth, which are happening no matter where you're giving birth or how you're giving birth, and supporting women in their choices. And then that kind of morphed into more of the training that I had in like the baby's consciousness, what Jayme was talking about. And I started learning a lot more about that when I started studying mindfulness and yoga and the nervous system and the interaction between the science behind the brain science and then what's happening in the body when you practice mindfulness. And then, of course, I got really excited when I learned about APA, which is the Association for Pre- and Perinatal Psychology and Health. And they are an amazing organization that puts out a lot of research and evidence and different things about literally that idea of the baby's consciousness. And we'll be interviewing a lot of people from that organization in the episodes to come. But the kind of the gist of it was, the experiences that the baby is having during even preconception and during gestation and during the birth experience itself and those first few hours, days, weeks of life, how that impacts their mental and physical health for the rest of their lives. That just really kind of all melted together into this program that I wrote and actually started teaching, and that is the Intuitive Birth and the Embryoga series. And so when Jayme approached me after this, I was like, wow, okay. Because to me, it's like, duh, yeah, we need to be really paying attention to what's going on when we're pregnant, and we need to be supporting moms during pregnancy and during birth, and especially afterwards. And it was so surprising to me that you had this is your 8th baby,
right?
And there were things that I was saying that you had never heard before,
right? Yeah. And the thing is I wasn't just a pregnant mom. Like every baby that I had, I read as much as I could. I was highly immersed in birth. I have been a birth nerd since my first baby, so I considered myself really knowledgeable when it came to all aspects of birth, pretty much as knowledgeable as you could be without actually having gone to college and have a degree of something, because I really, really loved this stuff. And it was so fascinating to think we spend 9 months of this baby, and even before when we're planning on getting pregnant, planning for this baby, and we get really wrapped up in the actual delivery, which is really important. I think that it's transformational and it's so important, but that's one day. There's so many things that go into being pregnant and having a baby and that affect the baby that I really think that we need to be talking about. Maybe not just the color of swaddle that we're going to put our baby in when they're born, or what color their nursery is going to be, or what brand of car seat we're going to buy. There's things that are really, really important that stick with you throughout parenting. And so that's why I felt like it was really imperative for Holly's information to sort of get out in the world, because in all the reading that I've done and all of the birth educators that I've spoken to and all of the midwives, this information was brand new to me. And that was fascinating to me because I've given birth in 3 different countries with all different midwives. I've had lots of birthy friends, and nobody's talked about the baby's consciousness, and never really thought about how Holly always says in her classes, ask your baby. What does your baby feel? What is your baby saying to you? Because they have a giant part in this, and this is you're affecting their life. So I really, really thought that was important to get out.
Well, thanks, Jayme.
Yeah, I was just like really impressed. And the funniest part is, I think I've said this, we've recorded a couple podcasts actually already, and I've said this every time. It's like the information that Holly has is really inside of us. It's like the way you do this. It's just, it kind of, you get these aha moments of awe, and you hear the things that Holly talks about and the people that support this and that know about this, and it gives you sort of affirmation that your gut and your instinct is correct.
Exactly.
And I think that's so important, because the world gives us so much information and we hear all these negative stories. Yesterday I was at the pool with my son, and I met a pregnant woman I'd never met before, and she was pregnant with her third baby, and she's due in just a few weeks. And her and I were talking about birth and babies and all of that, and she was having her baby with a midwife in a hospital this time, and she was telling me how she was still being inundated with negative stories. And I was so shocked, and her and I both talked about how it's really sad that people want to come up and talk to you when you're pregnant about all the horrible things that birth does or the reasons it's painful. And they come at you and they just think that they're going to win some sort of an award because they had this traumatic birth or this horrible thing happen to them. And it's really sad to me, because throughout your life as a child and as a woman, these are the stories that you hear and they get handed down.
Right.
And when it becomes your time to be pregnant and give birth, you have to weed through all the fear.
Right.
And the silly thing is most of the time, it's not scary or fearful or bad. There's things that can happen that you can't control, but you're equipped to do this.
Right.
And like you said, intuitive birth. Like,
right.
So this is why I think I reached out to Holly, and we started out just wanting to record the Embryoga series and the intuitive birthing series. And it kind of morphed into this project. Yeah,
I remember we were interviewing somebody for some of the footage that we were going to use for
the Embryoga videos.
The Embryoga videos, and also we were doing a little interviews as promotional things to get the Embryoga series going. And I looked over and we were talking to Christy and Megan and two local midwives, and Ben was back there kind of doing his video thing, and he was like, "This needs to be a podcast." And so we kind of put our Embryoga thing on hold, which we have a lot of things coming up and things that are going to be online available, the Embryoga series and the Intuitive Birth series and stuff like that. But we just decided that the podcast was kind of the most important thing to get started with. And so we just kind of moved into working on this podcast. And I think that everybody's going to enjoy it, because we have lots of really amazing speakers that we're going to be interviewing from all different areas. Anybody that has to do with birth. We'll be talking about preconception, about fertility, about, pregnancy, about the actual birth experience itself, and of course, early parenting, with an emphasis on this notion of what I like to call watering the seeds of peace for the next generation. Basically, how can we as women, as families, as parents, as partners, in whatever capacity you're in, really work to create positive and supportive environment around conception, gestation, birth, parenting, so that we can grow more peaceful babies and hopefully create a more peaceful society.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is important for us to make sure we say is I talk about unmedicated birth because it's a choice I made, but I have a lot of friends that made choices to have a medicated birth, or to have, we have a great friend that had an elective cesarean birth, and that she had her reasons, and it was her valid, amazing reasons. She had a beautiful birth, and she's, the outcome was perfect for her. And so our podcast isn't just about having an unmedicated birth out of the hospital and that's the way. It is about informed choice.
Right.
We just really feel that women need to have all of their options that they've researched and come to the conclusion that's best for them and their baby and their partners and their families. And so we just want to, in this podcast, present as many options and ideas around birth and people that you can bring into your birth space, into your pregnancy, to make it the best possible.
Exactly. And the reason we call it mindful birth, peaceful earth, is really what we're talking about. I mean, I am a practicing yogi, and I teach yoga, and I study mindfulness. And I look at the science, like the crossover behind Buddhist psychology and Western psychology. And so I kind of like tend towards, well, the evidence show and the research shows, and I bring a lot of the science, nerdy science brain stuff into it, and the nervous system. And really, when we're talking about mindfulness, there's a certain practice, and there's research and studies that go into that practice. But overall, generally speaking, when you're mindful, you're basically paying attention. You're noticing what's out there. You're noticing, that I have choices. And so when you're being mindful about those choices, it's like considering what impact those choices that you make might have. And as well, being aware that there are choices, because a lot of women don't even know that there's choices. They don't know the evidence. They don't know the information. And then sometimes things happen out of your control. Right. In fact, pretty much all of birth happens out of your control.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
But let's say some things happen that you may not have chosen, that might be a complication, or it's either because of something that you already know about or something that's unforeseen. And how can we be mindful in our responses to that disruption in our plan and still have a really positive experience?
Right. Yeah, that's the goal. I think that's the main reason. That's one of the reasons that I was really drawn to Holly too, is because she not only practices yoga and talks about being mindful and all of these kind of, people might say woo-y, type thoughts, but there's a lot of science that she backs it up with. And that's why I feel like it's really, really, really important. Like I said, I always say that it's just really important for this information to get out there, because it's interesting that there's science that backs up our intuition.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the best part. It's like you can, and that, I think, as maybe just the kind of humans that we are now, it makes it more valid for us sometimes. Mm-hmm. Because normally, if you have a pretty clean intuition, it usually is correct. There's something to say about when you get a gut instinct, regardless of what it is. But when there's a little science to back it up and says, yeah, you're doing the right thing, it's really great. It's really supportive, and you feel good, especially as a mom who's pregnant, who's growing this another human, and we're raising kids, and you're learning to, how do you discipline, and how do you speak to them, and how are they seeing our actions, and how is that affecting how they're going to be as people. And when your intuition is to pick your kid up and snuggle them and love them, or to co-sleep with them, but the co-sleeping people say, or the anti-co-sleepers say, don't do this, but your instinct is to do it. There's science. I feel like overall, with all of these choices, you go with your instinct, and you can find the science to support.
So we're going to be talking about both sides of the coin pretty much on almost every issue. So it's not just going to be presenting, for instance, I like co-sleeping. There's so much controversy between the medical community and the non-medical community or whatever. And we're just going to really want to be with evidence and science backing up, but getting different opinions, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And generally speaking, just remembering that peace on earth actually really seriously does begin before birth, when we're contemplating pregnancy, when we are having interaction with our partner, whether it's an opposite sex partner, same sex partner that is contemplating raising a family together, and during that gestational period, during the birth itself, of course, but all that leads up to that is where we plant the seeds in the growing brain of the baby and the parents of how to keep that nervous system wired towards peace and love and joy and connection and attachment.
And a lot of it comes from what's right for me is maybe not right for another person.
Exactly. And
I think that's the goal, is that you research your options, you hear about something. This is something I guess I've learned, and this is maybe why this is so important to me, as an early mom. I had my first baby at 18. you have these ideas of right and wrong. And you, for some reason, I thought that the way that I thought that things were going to work out the right way for me was right for everybody.
Right.
And I learned throughout the years that, wow, I can't impose my thoughts or my opinions of what I think is the right way to do something on someone else who has had a different journey and a different walk and has a different experience and a different brain, essentially, than me. So we are really excited, again, just to present all these different options and maybe things you didn't think about. And we hope to help solve problems for you and to help people come to some conclusions and open up the conversation.
Right.
And have it be a little bit more loving and kind. And you can have two people on different sides of the coin realize that, oh, there's 2 ways, 3 ways,
Right.
4 ways to do something.
Right. It's all about mindfulness.
Exactly.
Being mindful, acknowledging feelings, opening the conversation. That's what I really like, that joining the conversation. And and even, you know, like Jayme said, like I said earlier, like so many people don't even know
Right.
the science, the evidence, and like that they have choices. You know how many people, how many women I talk to that just, you know, give me a gown when I get to the hospital, and it's like, you don't have to wear a gown. Oh, I didn't even know that I had that option.
Right.
I didn't know that I didn't have to lay in the bed or whatever. So we're going to talk about those different things. We're going to be just sometimes the two of us, sometimes interviewing experts from across the globe, actually. A lot of local people that are wonderful birth workers, and hopefully we'll hear from some of you out there.
Right, yeah,
Because we want your birth stories.
Yeah, we're super excited about that. And I think we, as Holly and I were sitting, and before we were planning on doing the podcast, and we were interviewing moms and working on this Embryoga project that we'll release later on in the year, we kind of realized, wow, we like to talk about birth. Like, we could spend hours talking about it. We definitely, and it's not that I know everything for sure. I have a lot of experience, but I have a lot of interest in birth and a lot of passion for birth. And I'm always learning. And if I find out someone is a birth worker, I'll immediately start asking them questions because I love it. And Holly has a lot of, she has education and a lot of knowledge, and she has a lot of years of experience working with moms all across the board and different types of people that are birthing. And we can come together, and not that we have all the answers, but we would love to go find the answers. So we're really interested in bringing people on to ask them the questions that, you know, we don't have the answers for either. So.
Yeah, and maybe we don't even have the questions for yet.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear from all of you, and thank you so much for listening. And we will,
I guess, talk to you soon. We're super excited. Thanks so much for joining us today.
and remember, peace on earth
Begins before birth.
Hi, this is Christy, certified nurse midwife here at Idaho Stork. I am going to be talking to you today about omega-3 fatty acids in pregnancy, otherwise known as DHA, EPA. You may see this as an ingredient in your prenatal vitamin, or oftentimes women can get this from food. So we're going to review seafood safety in pregnancy today. There is a lot of misinformation out there on what's safe to eat in terms of seafood in pregnancy. Many women completely avoid fish because they are worried about causing harm to their baby. But our bodies can't make these omega-3 fatty acids, so we have to get them from our foods. Omega-3s are important because they improve your baby's eye and brain growth and early development. They also decrease the baby's chances of getting asthma and other allergy conditions. They have been shown to decrease the incidence of preterm birth as well as postpartum depression. Omega-3s can be found in fatty fish sources. They also can be found in fortified foods like milk, juice, yogurt, and eggs. Let's go over some questions that are often brought up by pregnant women about fish safety in pregnancy. It's important for pregnant women not to eat raw fish. This includes smoked fish, as we don't know how well it was cooked, or sushi. The amount of fish that a woman needs to get adequate DHA, or adequate omega-3 in other words, is about 2 to 3 servings of fish per week meet the criteria that a woman needs for omega-3s in pregnancy. This is equivalent to about 200 to 300 milligrams per day, which is the same dose you would find in your prenatal vitamin. So if you don't like fish, it's important to look at your prenatal vitamin and see if it has omega-3, in other words, DHA and EPA as an ingredient. Some women don't eat meat or fish and can find an algae-based omega supplement at the health food store. 2 to 3 servings per week meets the criteria because omega-3 stays in your body for a few days. We suggest avoiding cod liver oil, secondary to its high doses of vitamin A, which would be too much in pregnancy. Some of the highest sources of fish for omega-3 fatty acids are salmon, halibut, trout, canned light tuna, Atlantic or pickled herring, pollock, and whitefish. There are a list of fish you should stay away from when you're pregnant and even in breastfeeding, and these include swordfish, tilefish, king mackerel, golden bass, shark, tuna steaks, either fresh or frozen, marlin, Spanish mackerel, orange roughy, and as I mentioned before, any raw fish. Moderate sources of omega-3s can be found in catfish, king crab, flounder, shrimp, cod, and canned blue crab meat. Additionally, omega-3 enriched eggs are a great source of omega-3 in pregnancy. I hope this helped to clear up myths and give you information on seafood safety and the importance of omega-3s in pregnancy. Thanks.
Idaho Stork's healthcare team is small and dedicated. They support a choice in care models and believe that it's best to know their patients, attend their own deliveries, and provide care for their families for years to come. The Idaho Stork team is made up of Dr. Glenn Lovelace, an OBGYN, Christy Rhodes and Megan Kitterman, certified nurse midwives, and Angela Lotta, a nurse practitioner.